Hey guys, it's Casera, and today I have for you guys my March reading wrap-up. So for my March reading wrap-up, I'm going to be trying something a little different than I have in my previous wrap-up. My previous wrap-ups, I've been breaking them into two parts. The parts that I'm really interested in, like stats and goals and things like that, and then the parts that you guys are more interested in, which is like when I talk about the actual books that I read this month. But I feel like it's been causing some confusion. I feel like you guys don't really know which of the videos you should watch, and I feel like the YouTube algorithm is not really sure which of the videos it should suggest to you. So instead of doing two parts, I'm going to try doing one longer video in which I talk about all of that. I will still be breaking it up into like different sections, but I'll put timestamps down in the description for you guys so you guys can better navigate the video if you guys choose to do that. I'm really hoping to try and do this in under an hour because I don't want super long videos on my channel, but this month I've read the most books that I've ever read in a single month. So I still want to give all of the books that I've read their own time and actually talk about all of them. We have a lot to get through, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to talk about is my reading stats for the month. So I ended up reading 41 books in the month of March, which is a lot. My goal for March was to read 31 books. I wanted to try and go for 31 books in 31 days. I ended up reading 41 books. Mind you, 9 of those books are rereads. Then again, it was the rereadathon in the second week of March, so obviously there are going to be some rereads among them. I'm pretty happy with what I read. I had a really great reading month. I don't think I'm ever going to meet that like 41 books in one month ever again. So I really felt good that I was able to do it, but I don't think that's going to happen again. Like I kind of average out at about 20 books a month. That's kind of where I average out, mostly because of audiobooks. I'll read about 12 audiobooks a month and 8 physical books. That's kind of like where my split is. So I'm trying to lean more towards physical books, but I have a lot of time for audiobooks, so that doesn't happen all the time. So I'm always trying to like catch up with physical books, but I never can because like I have a lot more time for audiobooks. So that's why I end up reading so much. But 41 books is literally way more than I expected to read this month. Like I didn't expect to hit 31 when I said I was going to do 31 and 31. Like I didn't expect it to happen, and I went 10 books over. So I'm really happy that I met that goal, but at the same time, it's probably never going to happen like ever again. So by category, I read 3 contemporary books, 22 fantasy books, because you guys know I'm a fantasy buff. It's my favorite genre. So 22 fantasy books, 1 sci-fi book, 1 historical fiction book, 1 mystery/thriller novel, 2 classics. Yes, I got 2 classics done this month. 7 manga/graphic novels. 6 of them were manga, 1 graphic novel out of that. 1 poetry collection and 2 nonfiction books. I managed to squeeze some nonfictions in there, even though fantasy was definitely what was keeping me going this month. Like, loved fantasy. It was fantastic. I had a really good month by star rating also. I rated 23 books 5 stars. Mind you, there were 9 rereads, so a good amount of them were rereads, and I knew they were gonna be 5-star books, but still, 23 books at 5 stars is really, really good. Like, I really enjoyed myself with reading this month, so I was really happy about that. I also rated 4 4.5-star books, 8 4-star books, 3 3.5-star book, 1 2.5-star book, and 1 2-star book. Age range is my next category, and I think with age range, I'm really happy with the split I did with age range also, because usually I have mostly adult books and I don't really get into a whole lot of YA and almost never read children's books. But I ended up reading 14 adult books, 11 YA books, which I think is like probably the most YA books I've ever read in one month. I usually don't read that much YA. And I read 11 middle grade books. Again, that's a lot. Most of those are rereads though. We'll get to that in a moment. But 11 middle grade is still really good. I read 2 children's books, which I was surprised by. I usually don't read a whole lot of children's books, but I read 2 of them, and I read 3 miscellaneous books. So that's probably mostly the nonfiction and then just another one stuck in there. The page count kind of surprised me. So my average page count was 397 pages, which I expected this month to be a little bit lower on the page count just because I've been reading so much, and there were 6 volumes of a manga in there, and those tend to be smaller page counts. But what's really surprised me was the 300 to 400 page count. Usually my like median, like the most books I read are in the 400 to 500, but I had a lot of books in the 300 to 400 page count, which is like where most books lie. But usually I read a lot of fantasy, which are slightly higher page counts. So I was surprised by how many of them were meeting that 300 to 400. It was actually 14 total books, which is a lot. Also, if you're looking at the chart right now, there are 4 books that are over 700 pages. 3 of them are Harry Potter books. So like, don't get too excited about that. I didn't go too much into those higher page counts. Next month, I am trying to read more of those higher page counts, maybe not over 700, but definitely over 600 pages. But for this month, I really didn't read into the higher page counts at all. And then for physical versus audiobook, I was actually pretty even on that. I ended up reading 20 physical books, 1 ebook, and 21 audiobooks. So that's a pretty even split if you count the ebook in with the physical books. I finally actually got like almost a 50-50 split, which like never happens. So I'm really happy about that. So now we're gonna move on to my reading goals for the month. I have like 7 sort of reading goals plus my wrapped book challenge. So we'll get to the wrapped book challenge in a moment, but my 7 goals. The first one is to read 8 physical books in the month. I read 20 physical books, so I obviously met that goal. And then of the books that I read, I need to read 1 classic, 1 sci-fi, 1 historical fiction, 1 thriller / mystery novel, and 1 book over 700 pages. Last month it was 800 pages. This month I changed it to 700 pages. And I added a goal this month to read at least 1 reread that is not like my nightly rereads like of the Harry Potter series that I was doing this month. So 1 reread for the month as well. So for my classic novel, I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. My sci-fi book for this month was Caliban's War by James S.A. Corey. My historical fiction novel was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. For my mystery / thriller novel, I read Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. For my book that's over 700 pages, I read Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. This is actually 850 pages, so it's also over 800 pages. And for my reread this month, that is not like one of the nighttime rereads, I had a few to pick from, but for this one, I'm gonna go with Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I'm gonna be talking about all of those books in some of my later parts, so you can look out for those in those later sections. But now I want to talk about my Unwrapped book challenge. For those of you who don't know, my Unwrapped book challenge are like basically my last chance self. Before I unhaul books, I choose books that I'm just gonna get rid of. I don't want to give it a last shot, and then I look at all my unread books and decide which ones are gonna get a last chance before I unhaul them, and I wrap them up in wrapping paper and I put them on the shelf, and every week I open a new book and try and read it. I have to get to at least 50% of that book that week in order to keep the book, which really motivates me to try and read that book and try and finish that book, and I get 1 save per month. So out of all the books that I actually DNF'd that month, I can save 1 of them. So these are the books that I unwrapped in the month of March. So the first book that I unwrapped in the month of March is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I was a little hesitant when I unwrapped this book because I did try and read this book previously. When it first came out, I bought the book and I tried to read it, and I DNF'd it after like 11 pages or something like that. I really didn't like the book when I first started reading it. I thought all the characters were pretentious and were horrible people, and I didn't like the book because of that. In the first week of March, I unwrapped this book, started reading it, and I thought all the characters were pretentious and horrible people, and I absolutely loved it. You have no idea how much I loved it this time around. That just goes to show you reading tastes change a lot. I absolutely love this book this time around. I did get the audiobook for this from my library because I prefer reading thriller novels on audio. I just prefer it that way. I do like having the physical book that I can follow along with sometimes though also. I particularly like the second half of this book. It's really good. I really like the second half of this book. So really love this book. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars and really happy that I gave it a second chance. The next book that I ended up unwrapping in the month of March is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I wasn't really sure about this book either when I unwrapped it because Neil Gaiman is an author that I have read before and haven't liked. He's an author that I really want to like. I feel like I should like Neil Gaiman. He has such beautiful writing. I love his writing, but I never like his books. I read American Gods and Ocean at the End of the Lane by him. I liked Ocean at the End of the Lane more than American Gods. American Gods, I really like the idea of the book. I really like Neil Gaiman's writing. The book itself bored me to death. I really just didn't feel very much about the actual book. Ocean at the End of the Lane, I liked a lot more, mostly because the audiobook is really well done, which is also read by Neil Gaiman. So when I got this book, I considered getting the audiobook, but I didn't get it right away. Like I read the first 50% of the book first, and then I was like, wait, hold on. Neil Gaiman's a great audiobook narrator. I wonder if he narrated the book. So for the second half of the book, I saw the audiobook was available in my library, so I got the audiobook for it. And the audiobook is amazing. Like, mind you, I did enjoy the first half of the book. It was a little episodic, so it was a little bit annoying for that aspect, but the second half of the book, I really loved. I was actually starting to get like mini Harry Potter vibes from it. And that's partially because it's middle grade, but it's also partially because there are similar themes in Harry Potter to the themes that happen in this book, and I really love that about it. I don't want to say what the trope is specifically, because if I tell you the trope, then it gives away the ending to this book, which I don't want to do, but like, it was good. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Week 3 is when my Wrapped book challenge really didn't go so well. So in week 3, I ended up unwrapping Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. There is nothing wrong with this book. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a YA high fantasy, and it reads like a YA high fantasy. I just didn't want it. I was in the mood for it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I was in the mood for a YA high fantasy. I just wasn't in the mood for this YA high fantasy. I think part of the reason is it was trying too hard to be a fantasy book, and it wasn't succeeding. I don't know how to explain that because it just felt like the narrator was more interested in like whether this character might possibly like this other character than it was in like the actual political intrigue of the novel. Like, there there's good political setup between these three kingdoms that are like at odds with each other, which is really, really interesting to me. But it's told through teenagers that are way more interested in whether they potentially like this guard or maybe they're interested in this prince instead. And I just wasn't having it with this book. I just felt like it was trying too hard to be a fantasy book, but it was really just like a romance novel. But there was good world building in it, but at the same time, it felt a little cliche, like all of the things, like it didn't seem unique to me, I guess, is the best way of putting it. I ended up DNFing this book and I will be unhauling it. So the last book that I ended up unwrapping in the month of March is The Ring and the Crown by Melissa De La Cruz. I have the same issues with this book as I did with the last one. And this one, I actually kind of liked a little bit more, because even though the last one was more of the type of book that like I really look for just because of the political intrigue and like the actual setup of the kingdoms and all of that, this book intrigued me a little bit more because I liked the voice of this book more, I guess is the best way to put it. I liked the voice of it, and I also felt like this book wasn't trying as hard as that book to be a fantasy book. This book felt a little bit more like the Selection series to me. The Selection series doesn't try so hard to be a fantasy book or a dystopian book or whatever it's supposed to be. It knows that it's a romance novel, it just has that setting. This book kind of knows that it's like, it has mages and stuff like that, but it kind of knows that like that's not the whole point of the book. I felt like Fallen Kingdoms was trying to make the fantasy as more of a point of the book, pretending that it wasn't about the drama when it was really more about the drama. This one, to me, felt like it knew it was about the drama. So like for this one, I did DNF it also, and it will be an unhaul. But for this one, I thought I was gonna use my save for the month for this book. I've read YA books since then that were just so much better than it. I can't see myself going back to this book. So it's gonna be an unhaul also. So I will not be using my save for this month, which I think is a good thing. I don't want to use my saves for the month because if I read the book and I like the book, then I should keep it. If I don't like the book enough to actually read it, I don't want to save it unless I'm like really sure that I'm gonna read it later. So yeah, that's what might happen with my wrap book challenge for this month. I think I did a pretty good job because I'm calling out the books that I really know that I don't want to read, and I'm finding those diamonds in the rough that I wasn't really sure about that turns out I'm actually really liking. So now I'm going to talk about my DNFs for this month that are not included in those unwrapped books. So I had 2 DNFs for the month. The first one is like a true DNF, and that's The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. I picked up the audiobook for this one and I really hated the audiobook. Like really hated the narrators for the audiobook. I thought I was interested in the content, but I could not stand the narrators. I listened to about 2 hours of the audiobook and I was just like, nope, this is not happening. I put the ebook on hold at my library, but recently I actually canceled the hold because I just feel like I'm not interested in The Gilded Wolves enough to actually read the book. Maybe like in a year or so, like after I've read some of her other books that I actually do own, then I'll consider reading The Gilded Wolves again, but I feel like it's just not for me, and so I don't really have any plans to pick it up again. The other DNF, I feel like it's just me being stupid, and that's The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Hear me out before you say anything about this one. I have read this book in the past. This was supposed to be a reread for me. This was supposed to be giving a book a second chance. And when I went into this book, I didn't remember anything about it. I didn't remember anything at all about this book other than I did like it back when I first read it. Didn't love it, which is why I didn't continue on with the series, but I did enjoy reading it as I was reading it. But I didn't remember the setting. I didn't remember any of the characters. I didn't remember anything about this book. As I was reading this book, every time I would start a new scene, I would read like the first 2 sentences, and then I suddenly remembered the entire scene, but I didn't remember the next scene. So it felt like I had read that scene, even though I hadn't read that scene. I'd only read the first 2 sentences of that scene. So my brain was like already on the next scene, but I still had the whole scene to read. It was just like tricking out my brain in weird ways that I just like, I had to put it down because my brain couldn't handle all of the information it was processing, if that makes sense. So like, it's definitely me being stupid. Like that's the reason why I couldn't pick up this book. I have to say though, like I really like the writing in this one. I didn't remember liking the writing before. Of course, back then I didn't care so much about writing style. Now I care a lot more about writing style. Like it's half the reason I read books sometimes, but I really love the writing style in this one. Like Joe Abercrombie's writing style is really good. So I'm excited to get to this one when I eventually get to it. I'm thinking I'm gonna pick up the audiobook for the first one and I'll read the other 2 physically, just because my mind is having trouble like remembering things and then realizing that I haven't read them yet, like that I haven't actually reread them. Like my mind's being weird and it doesn't like rereading apparently when I don't remember the book in the first place. So yeah, it was me being stupid stupid. That's the only reason. So I'm just waiting for the audiobook to come off of hold for my library, and I will end up picking this one up again. I don't know if I'll pick it up anytime soon just because I have a lot of series that I'm currently in the middle of, and I don't know if I want to add another one, but I'm adding other series, so there's a good chance that I'll end up picking this one up when I get the audiobook off of hold. So now it's time to talk about my rereads for the month. So there was the rereadathon, so I have more rereads than I normally would. Also, like, I kind of got a little carried away with Harry Potter, so I have those also. I will talk about those a little bit later. I'll go in order, but if it's more than one from the same series, then I'll just talk about all of them at the same time. The first book that I reread this month was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and I listened to the audiobook for this one, which I hadn't listened to it the first time around. The first time around, I read the physical book. I didn't remember anything about the physical book, but I wanted to move on with the next two books in the Farseer trilogy because it turns out I'm really interested in the Realm of the Elderlings, and I really want to read all of the books in the Realm of the Elderlings. But to do that, I have to read the Farseer trilogy first because it's the first trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings. But I had read Assassin's Apprentice, and I didn't remember anything about it, so to continue on with the series, I needed to read Assassin's Apprentice again. So I picked up the audiobook for it, and I actually really enjoyed the audiobook. The audiobook narrator, Paul Bamer, is pretty good. He's not like my favorite audiobook narrator ever. He's a decent audiobook narrator. I tend to read his books a little bit faster than some of the other audiobooks that I read. Like, my average speed for audiobook narrators is about 1.5, and like occasionally, like with Black Leopard, Red Wolf, I read a little bit slower, like 1.25. With this book and other books that are narrated by Paul Bamer, I tend to read a little bit faster at like a 1.75 speed. It just works better for me. I don't know, I'm kind of like weird with my narrator speeds. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with me. Like, the narrator really does choose the speed in which you read your audiobooks, at least in my opinion. So with Paul Bamer, I read like at 1.75 speed. So I went through this book a little bit faster than I had intended to, but I did enjoy it this time around. Like, the first time around, I don't remember liking this book, which is why I didn't continue on. I did end up giving it 4 stars though, so like I had to like it enough, but I remember it annoying me the first time around. This time around, it didn't annoy me. I was just like really interested in like the backstory to like the Realm of the Elderlings, and maybe that's why I didn't really care that much for the character or like the plot and what he was doing, but I love the world building in it, and that's what kept me reading, and I'm really interested to continue on with the Farseer trilogy in April. Also, rereading this book on audio is what gave me the idea for The Blade itself, because I hadn't really thought of listening to the audiobook of that one. It's a really good idea, which is why I'm gonna end up listening to the audiobook as a reread, and then I'll read the other books like physically for that. So the next reread that I did in the month of March is Once Upon a Miracle by Jean Ferris. This is one of the few rereads that I actually read for the rereadathon, and I'm really glad that I did. This is the book that I loved as a child. I would also consider this a children's book, not a middle grade book. It reads a bit younger than middle grade, but I really, really enjoyed it. It definitely reads like a fairy tale, as the title suggests, and it's about a boy who grows up in the forest, and he watches the princess from afar, and the princess is someone who could hear other people's thoughts, but only when they're touching her, so people don't touch her. So she's like really lonely, and he kind of like befriends her, and it's such a cute and fun story, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's definitely still one of my childhood favorites. So the next books that I reread were the last 4 books in the Harry Potter series. I'm only holding up one of them because it's too much to get out right now, but I reread Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and The Deathly Hallows. As I was in the rereadathon, I was like, let me just use these as my audiobooks, because I've been rereading the Harry Potter series on audio since January, but only 30 minutes at night as I'm going to sleep, and this was worked for me because when I wake up in the morning, I can go back to the time that I remember reading last, because sometimes I fall asleep before the 30-minute timer is up. This has been working for me because I know the Harry Potter books really well, and I do get to reread them, even though like I'm not like really rereading them, except I really reread them this month because I just didn't stop. I decided to use it as my audiobook for the rereadathon, and then I just didn't stop. I just listened to all of them in like the course of a weekend, so that happened. Obviously, I love them. They're one of my favorite series ever, and I'm sure you guys all know about the Harry Potter series, so I'm not gonna continue boring you with this. By the way, the audiobook narrator for the Harry Potter series is Jim Dale, and I absolutely love him as an audiobook narrator. One of my favorite audiobook narrators, so I highly recommend the audiobooks. So when I finished the Harry Potter series rereads, I needed to pick new rereads to listen to half an hour at night as I'm falling asleep. So I decided to pick my next most reread series, and that is The Underling Chronicles by Suzanne Collins, and I finished the first 3 books in that series, which are Gregor the Overlander, Gregor and the Prophecy of Bane, and Gregor and the Curse of the Warmbloods. So as far as middle grade series go and childhood favorites, this is definitely my second favorite childhood series after the Harry Potter series. I absolutely loved this as a child, and I reread these all the time. Like, if I reread the Harry Potter series once a year, I read these once every 2 years. Like, I absolutely love this series, and I adore them even more every time I reread them. The audiobook narrator for these is Paul Bamer, the same as the Farseer trilogy, which is part of the reason why I decided to pick these up, because I knew the narrator and I knew he would do a pretty good job of them. I don't think the audiobooks are as good for the Underlying Chronicles as they are for the Harry Potter series. The Harry Potter series audiobooks are fantastic. The Underlying Chronicles ones are just okay, but I still really enjoy being back in this world. I have a really hard time when I wake up in the morning just not continuing on with them, like as I'm getting ready and stuff, and switching to like my daytime audiobooks, because like I just get so invested in this world and these characters, and they just feel like real people to me, and I absolutely love it. By the way, I'm almost done with that series, so I have to pick like a new series to start rereading. I'm trying to decide between The Wise Man's Fear, picking the second one in the Kingkiller Chronicles instead of The Name of the Wind, because I've recently reread The Name of the Wind. So I'm trying to decide between The Wise Man's Fear or starting the Wheel of Time series. Maybe I'll do The Wise Man's Fear and then start the Wheel of Time series. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and which one you guys think I should prioritize, or if there's another book that I've read that you know I've read that I really like that you think I should pick up instead. Before we get to the part that you guys are more excited for than all of this other stuff that I really enjoy doing, that I know you guys aren't as interested in, I need to talk a little bit about the nonfiction books that I read this month. So I read 2 nonfiction books in the month of March. The first nonfiction book that I read is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I ended up giving it 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. I listened to the audiobook and it's narrated by Michelle Obama, which I love audiobook memoirs that are narrated by the author, so like really love that aspect of it. From this book, I think my favorite part is actually the beginning when she talks about her childhood, because it's something that like I didn't know where she came from. I didn't know anything about her before like she became Michelle Obama. So like it was really interesting seeing that aspect of her, but I also really liked her perspective after she, you know, became Michelle Obama, because we get to see like different events and things that we saw like as ourselves, like that actually happened in the world, but like from her perspective, which is very unique and very interesting, and I really enjoyed reading it. The other nonfiction book that I read this month is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I really enjoyed this as well. This is like a science nonfiction book because it talks about the science of sleep, which is really interesting and really fascinating to me. I was really surprised by like how important sleep is. Like I never really thought of it before. Like I always thought sleep was important, like intuitively, and I remember like telling my teachers and stuff like that, like we shouldn't have like night exams in college because like after 8 p.m. like my mind doesn't work anymore. I didn't realize there's actually scientific evidence to show that like yes, after 8 p.m. when you're tired and you're like getting close to going to sleep, yeah, your mind doesn't work half as well as it does at 8 a.m. when you're awake and all of that. Like I didn't even know that, but it turns out there's scientific evidence backing that up, and I really enjoyed reading it. I really loved like all of his perspective and like all the facts and figures that you get from that, and the appendix also gives you like ideas on how to sleep better and like different routines and stuff that you should do. I actually realized that I do a lot of the stuff that he mentions already just intuitively, which I thought was interesting. So really enjoyed it. The audiobook, by the way, is really good, really well produced, and I really enjoyed it. So definitely recommend this one if you like nonfiction. So now for what you guys actually want to hear about, which are the fiction books that I chose to read this month. I'm gonna start with my lowest rated book and work my way up to my highest rated book. So my lowest rated book in the month of March is Children of Blood and Bone by Tony Adeyemi. I had planned to do a full review of this one, but I just feel like I've said enough horrible things about this book through my reading vlogs that I don't need to single it out in an actual review. Like I feel like that's just mean at this point. Last year I picked up this book when it first came out because of the hype. I bought the book, I bought the actual hardcover, which I really regret now because I never buy hardcovers, especially high fantasy. Like I don't like reading high fantasy hardcovers, so I don't buy them unless I plan to read them right away. And like literally right after the hype died, like a week after the hype died, I got the book, and then there were so many bad reviews of this book coming out that I was just like, okay, so I'm not that excited to read it anymore. But then it was nominated for Book to SFF Award for Best Debut, so I was like, okay, well if it's nominated, maybe it's better than everyone says it is. So I decided to read it. It's not better than everyone says it is. Like when I first started reading this, I had high hopes for this book. Even though like I knew that there was stuff that's gonna happen later on, mainly the romance that everyone complains about. I knew that was gonna happen later on, that I probably wasn't gonna like it. I still had high hopes for the book because I was enjoying it in the first like little bit. That didn't last very long. First of all, I really don't like the main character Zaylee. Don't like her at all. Don't really like Amari either, which is another main character in the book. I wanted to like Amari. She has an interesting character arc, but like by the end of it, what she does at the end, I actually didn't like it. I feel like most people like Amari and what she does at the end. I did not. Mostly because she doesn't know. I won't go into that just because spoilers. Didn't like her. The boys in this book. So the boys in this book, Inan and Zayn, I just felt like they were there to fill out the cast. I didn't feel like they were real people. With those two, it really felt like flipping a switch. Like you flip the switch, Inan's the bad guy, Zayn's the good guy. You flip the switch again, Inan's the good guy, Zayn's the bad guy. Flip it again, Inan's the bad guy, Zayn's the good guy. I don't even know if I said that right. It just didn't work for me. Like I feel like a lot of times in high fantasy, especially like adult high fantasy, they do this with female characters, where like some female characters are like just stock characters that are bad female characters, and then some that are like just like these good badass female characters and stuff like that. And like there's like stock characters for them, but they're not real people. They just feel like they're there just to fill out the cast. And that's how I felt about the male characters in this book. I felt like they were just there to fill out the cast, and I don't appreciate that. Am I fine with feminist literature? I love feminist literature, but this is not feminist if the male characters aren't real people. Like, men are real people too. Write them like real people, and it didn't feel like they were real people in this book to me. I'm getting a little upset, but we're gonna talk a little bit about plot. Plot was good. I know, you didn't expect that. The idea of the plot was good. Each different plot point was good. The execution going from plot point to plot point felt underdeveloped. I just feel like it didn't connect well, and that each plot point kind of came out of nowhere. There wasn't a clear connection between each one, and I felt like it was a sketch of a plot rather than actually fully developed plot. I think the thing that was most disappointing to me was the world building, specifically the magic system. When I first heard about the book, I heard that the magic system was inspired by Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I loved Avatar: The Last Airbender as a child. It was my favorite TV show as a child. The one thing I loved about the show so much was the magic system. I love the fact that the magic system was like you had to train to actually use the magic system, and it was fun and it was interesting, and like people who worked hard did well with the magic system, which is not like a normal thing for magic systems, especially back then. Magic was magic. Like how magic worked, like you didn't know how magic worked. It was just magic, which is literally the worst way to do a magic system, and that's how this one worked. Like the magic in this world is kind of dead, and so they find ways to bring the magic back, specifically this scroll. So if you touch the scroll, you have magic, but they didn't have to do anything. Like they didn't have any training or anything like that. Suddenly they touch the scroll and yay, they're magic and they can fight, and they're like good at fighting and everything, except you wouldn't be good at fighting if you just had magic for the first time 10 minutes ago. Like it would take you longer to become a good fighter. So yeah, that annoyed me. Also, there wasn't a whole lot of actual magic in it. It was way more interested in like the character relationships than it was in the magic, which I guess is where we're getting to the romance. The idea of the romance was fine. I didn't have a problem with the idea of what this romance should be. I just think it was really poorly executed. That's all. That's all I can say about that. This book as a premise, as an idea, is a really good idea. I love the idea of this book. I don't like the execution of it. I don't like the actual book that I read. So yeah, I ended up giving it 2 stars. The next lowest book that I rated this month was City of Brass by S.A. Chakrabarti. If you're watching this video, you might think I hate high fantasy. I don't hate high fantasy. High fantasy is my favorite genre to read. I just have really high expectations for high fantasy, and these books did not meet those expectations. So for City of Brass, I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. There was a lot of things I liked about this book and a lot of things I really didn't like about this book. I did not like the characters in this book. There was one character that I liked. He was great. I didn't like any of the other characters in this book. I thought the romance was forced. I didn't like the romance in this book. I thought the plot was actually pretty good. The plot was actually pretty good. The world building was actually pretty good. But I really hated the writing style, and I feel like the writing style made this book a lot more confusing than it should have been. So that's why I didn't like it. If you want more details into why I didn't like this book as much as I really wanted to, I did do a full review on this one, so I will link that up in the corner for you guys. So yeah, I really wanted to like this book, but I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. So all the rest of the books that I read this month were more than 3.5 stars. So that means I really enjoyed them. So I had a really good reading month, even though I was so frustrated by those 2 books. So I want to spend a little bit more time on the books that I actually enjoyed. So now we're gonna go into my 3.5 star books. So for the rest of these books that I want to talk about is China Rich Girlfriend by Kevin Kwan. I listened to the audiobook for this one. I mainly gave it 3.5 stars, I think, because the first book in the series, Crazy Rich Asians, I really enjoyed, but the main reason I really enjoyed it because it was a world that I didn't really know anything about, so I was enjoying understanding it and getting to know this world and like being immersed in this world, even though like it's our contemporary world. It's just part of the world that I didn't know, like I've never experienced before, and it was fun experiencing it through Rachel, who also had never experienced this world before and is getting thrown in and having to deal with all of these things. Like, it was easy to see this world through her eyes. I feel like in China Rich Girlfriend, like that initial like awe is gone and it's just all this pettiness that's happening, and I don't enjoy the pettiness. So like I enjoyed reading it because I still liked Rachel and I also still like Astrid, but there's a bunch of other characters in this that I just really didn't care for and was kind of bored with as I was listening to the audiobook. So I probably will not be continuing on to the rest of the series, but I did enjoy this book. And if you like Crazy Rich Asians and you liked it for more than just like the initial novelty of it, then there's a good chance you will continue liking this series. The next book that I rated 3.5 stars is Arushan, The End of Time by Roshni Chakshi. I read this book for the BookTube SFF Awards. It was nominated for Best Middle Grade, and I do really love middle grade, so I was really excited to go into this one because I was hoping I would really like it. And I did really enjoy reading it. I thought the plot was good. I thought the idea of it was really good. It did remind me a lot of the Percy Jackson series. It almost felt like the same book, but with like an Indian girl as the main character. There were some things that annoyed me about the book, especially the pop culture references. It tried to be too American, I feel like. I think it tried way too hard to be Americanized when I felt like it should have just went for it. Like it should have just embraced its Indian culture, and I think I would have liked the book a lot more. But I still really enjoyed it and gave it 3.5 stars. The next series I want to talk about is Full Metal Alchemist by Harumi Arakara. I read the first 6 volumes of this series, and I didn't give all of them 3.5 stars. I gave volume 1 3.5 stars and volumes 2 and 3 4 stars. I gave volumes 4 and 5 4.5 stars, and I gave volume 6 5 stars. So I did really enjoy this series. I just thought it started out really slow. Volume 6 I've been waiting for. Like after like the initial chapter in volume 1, I was waiting for that backstory that we finally get in volume 6. So like at volume 6, like I'm hooked. I want this series. I'm ready to continue on with it. I love the characters. I love the world building. It's just the first 5 volumes, the plot is not quite where I wanted it to be. Volume 6, it finally got to where I wanted to go. So I'm really excited to continue on with this series. So now we're gonna move on to all the books that I rated 4 stars. The first one I want to talk about is The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. I really enjoyed this. This is a graphic novel. I got it from the Outcrate, I think February box. I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I had never read a graphic novel before, so I hadn't really known what to expect from it, but I did really enjoy it. I really love the art in it. I was surprised by how much I got pulled into the world of this story, even though like it's a really short graphic novel, but it has beautiful artwork, and like I even liked, like that's my favorite one right there. That page, that's like my favorite page. And I actually really like the characters also. So I'm definitely interested in reading more of her stuff. Graphic novels are really not my thing though, so I don't know if I'll get to any of them, but definitely if I get them like in Outcrate boxes like I did this one, I'll definitely get to them because it was definitely just a fun like 1 hour read. The next book that I rated 4 stars is actually a poetry collection. It's The Princess Saves Herself in This One by Amanda Lovelace. I think this actually won the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Poetry in 2018. I did really enjoy it. I loved the fantasy aspect to it because most like contemporary poetry does not have that fantasy aspect, but it kind of felt like a child dreaming up these poems, and I really enjoyed that aspect about it. There was like a couple poems in there that I really liked. There's a good amount of them though that I didn't like as much, so I did enjoy reading it and I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was also one, like it was pretty short. I read it at work one day, like when I didn't have my headphones so I couldn't listen to audiobooks. I read the ebook for it. So like it's really short, it's really fast to get through, and I enjoyed myself. The next one I want to talk about is Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. I really enjoyed Sea of Monsters. This is the second book in the Percy Jackson series. I hadn't really known what to expect. I really loved The Lightning Thief. Like I hadn't expected to like The Lightning Thief just because Percy Jackson wasn't really a character that I thought I would like. He's just not the type of character I normally would like, even though he's in a middle grade book and I love middle grade books. But I ended up liking him a lot more than I thought I would, and I definitely enjoyed reading Sea of Monsters. It wasn't my favorite of the series. Obviously, I really loved The Lightning Thief, and I'm hoping to continue on with the series, and hopefully I'll like the rest of the series also. The last book that I ended up rating 4 stars was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I really enjoyed reading this book. This is the World War II historical fiction. It's following a 12-year-old blind girl who is running away from the Nazis. It's also following a boy who is joining the Hitler Youth, and it's just interesting perspectives. I like to see how the plot lines interconnect, and it was just such a beautiful novel. The writing in this book is so beautiful and so interesting. I listened to the audiobook for this one, which I actually don't recommend the audiobook because it has like this like white noise sound in the background, so I didn't enjoy that, but I did enjoy the actual book, and I definitely understand why so many people think this is such a life-changing book. I definitely understand that, and I enjoyed reading it. So I've actually already talked about all of the books that I rated 4.5 stars, so we're going to skip to all of the books that I rated 5 stars. So the first book that I want to talk about is Once and For All by Sarah Dessen. This I actually finished like on the first day of March. I read most of it in February. This is actually actually one of my February Unwrapped books. I really enjoyed it. I talked a lot about this one in like my February vlog, so I won't go too in depth. I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. I thought I had outgrown Sarah Dessen books, but it turns out that I didn't. There's a lot more to this book than just another YA book. I feel like it's really well written, and I enjoyed reading it, and I ended up giving it 5 stars, even though I hadn't really planned to. So definitely really enjoyed it. The next book that I want to talk about is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I also read most of this in February, but I finished it in March, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't know that I was gonna like this one as much as I did, because like the first half of it, I was kind of struggling, mostly with the dialogue. I didn't really like how the dialogue was done, mostly because like there's like exclamation points and stuff when I just felt like there shouldn't have been. Like I didn't like the punctuation of the dialogue, but I picked up the audiobook for it from Audible, the Rosamund Pike edition, and I absolutely loved it when I listened to the audiobook as I was going through it, because the audiobook narrator just translates the dialogue in a way that like actually makes sense, and it's not like changing the words. Like the words are the same, just like the inflections and stuff like that really make the dialogue pop and like are actually really good, and I absolutely loved it because of that. Also, the book is actually really good. I love the content of the book, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I absolutely love this book. After I finished Pride and Prejudice and realized an audiobook narrator reading the dialogue actually makes it a lot better, because the dialogue was my main problem in this book also. I think it was just because of the time it was written in. I was having the same problems with dialogue with this one as the other one. So I decided to try the same thing and try the audiobook for this one. I actually found an unabridged copy of this audiobook, because before I was only finding dramatized versions, which I really didn't want to read a dramatized version, because at that point just watch the movie. I found an unabridged version, and I absolutely loved it. I finished to the end, and Sam at the end of this book is, he's so precious. Sam is so precious at the end of this book, and I am so excited to finally get to Return of the King. So the next one I want to talk about is The Girl in the Tower, and also The Winter of Witch by Catherine Arden. These are the last 2 novels in the Winternight trilogy. I listened to both of these on audio. By the way, the audiobook is not my favorite for these. I just don't like the narrator that much for the audiobooks, but the writing of these books lend really well to audio. So even though I didn't like the narrator that much, the books still were really good on audio. Absolutely enjoyed this series. Beautiful writing. Love the Russian wilderness setting. I love the fairy tales. I love the idea of these books, like the time it was set in, and like how that actually relates to actual historical events that happened during that time, and really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it if you haven't read this trilogy. Beautiful trilogy. Wonderful fantasy, and I absolutely enjoyed it. So the next book that I want to talk about is Vita Nostra by Maria and Sergei Dyachenkov. I absolutely love this book. This is the book that is translated from Russian. It was originally written by Ukrainian authors, and it's a magic school book, but it's written in a very interesting way. The writing is so beautiful. Like the writing is almost literary in the way that it's written, and the audiobook production is so good and does such a good job of portraying these words. And I really want to get a physical copy of this book, because it's a book that I do want to reread at some point, because it kind of messes with your mind, and you're not really sure what's real and what's not real and what should be real. Like it's so interesting and so fascinating. I'm so excited for the next book to be translated into English. It's also a book that I feel like more people should read. So if you haven't read Vita Nostra yet, go pick it up. Also, it's also a book that you probably shouldn't know that much going into it. If you liked magic school books, like if that's a trope that you like, or boarding school books, or just like interesting magic or something like that, try the book. Try it. Trust me, it's really good. So the next book that I want to talk about is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I absolutely love this book. I decided to pick up the audiobook for it, and I mostly decided to pick it up because I was on a Jim Dale hangover, because I had just finished the Harry Potter audiobooks, which is narrated by Jim Dale, which is one of my favorite audiobook narrators. So I wanted more books that he's narrated. I didn't want to go back to books that I've read before, like The Night Circus, for example. So I decided to pick up one of his other books, and I found out that Peter Pan was narrated by him, so I decided to pick it up. It's only a 4-hour audiobook. Absolutely loved it. I listened to it in one day. The audiobook is so well done. Absolutely love the audiobook. But the story itself is so good. Like, it's so funny. Like, love Peter. Peter's so funny. I didn't expect to be like laughing out loud at work while I was listening to this audiobook. I rarely get like actual physical reactions when I listen to audiobooks, or even when I read physical books. I was literally laughing out loud for Peter's antics. So absolutely enjoyed the book. So good. And I highly recommend it if you guys like classic children's literature. Highly recommend it. The next book I want to talk about is Us Against You by Frederick Bachman. I actually listened to this as an audiobook also. I got the physical book afterwards because I got a really good deal on it, but I really enjoyed the audiobook for this one. This is the sequel to Beartown, and I didn't really expect to like this one as much as I like Beartown, mostly because I felt like Beartown was a contained novel and it didn't really need a sequel. But this one, I feel like it didn't feel like a sequel to Beartown. Like, yes, it's a sequel, and it's obviously a sequel, and you need to read Beartown to understand Us Against You properly, but the themes and stuff that it explored in Us Against You were different than those that were explored in Beartown. They were different, and they were self-contained within this novel, and so well done. I absolutely love Frederick Bachman, definitely one of my new favorite authors, and I'm so excited to read more by him. So the next book I want to talk about is definitely another one of my new favorite books of all time, and that is Crown of Feathers by Nikki Paparetto. This book was so surprising to me. I didn't know what to expect going to this book. This is, by the way, the Outcrate book for February of 2019. I absolutely love everything about this book. This is about Phoenix Riders, and at the beginning of the novel, there's no more Phoenix Riders, like they've been extinct for a really long time, and our main character and her sister have found 2 Phoenix eggs, and they're trying to hatch them to become Phoenix Riders, and it's just so beautifully done. I love the political intrigue in this book. I love the world building in this book. There's great magical history that is really interesting and ties to the plot of this story. When I read this book, I was pretty sure this was gonna be like my favorite YA book of the month, possibly even my favorite YA book of the year, because of just how much I loved it. I read it in like the course of a day, maybe 2 days, just because I had to go to work, I think, in between them. Absolutely loved this book. Loved everything about it. There's like sort of a maybe budding romance that was done really well. There's like some really great tropes, a girl pretending to be a boy because like of what she wants to do in life and her career, which is just some fun trope that I absolutely love. It was so well done, and I cannot wait for the next book in this series. Also, purple sprayed edges. Love the purple sprayed edges and the nighttime cover. Love it, absolutely love it, and I'm so happy that I got the Outcrate for this one. The next 5-star book that I want to talk about is coming as no surprise to you guys, and that is Caliban's War by James S.A. Corey. As you guys know, I'm loving the Expanse series. I'm so excited to move on to Abaddon's Gate because the end of this book like made my heartbeat like speed up like so much when the ending happened. Like I was so excited for the next book in the series when the ending happened. I absolutely love every second of this book. These books, by the way, move so quickly. Like there are multiple point of view characters, but like the plot of this book is just always such a driving pace, and it's so hard like when you're reading this book to put it down. So that's why I have such a hard time of like actually picking it up, because I don't want it to end so quickly, because I'm so excited to like just like stay in this world for a little bit longer that I don't pick it up because I want to extend my time with it. But there are like 7 other books in this series, so I'm definitely excited to get on to the next one. It was so good, so good. Leviathan Wakes, the first one in the series, was definitely better than the second one, but at the same time, this one was still really good, and I'm so excited for the next one. The next one is also not going to be a surprise to anyone, and that is Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. This is the second novel in the Lives of Traitors trilogy, which is the second trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings. I absolutely love the first novel in the trilogy, and I absolutely love the second novel as well. You learn so much in this book for the world building and like what everything actually means and what's going on. Like you learn so much, and I love the characters. This is a very character-driven story, and I love every single one of them. Well, I love to hate some of them, but I do really love following these characters. They're so well built. They're so like, they feel like real people. They have flaws, but like they're also like really good people sometimes, and I really am excited to continue on with the series. I'm actually reading the 3rd book in the series right now. I don't know if I'll finish it before the end of March. I have like a day and a half, and I have like 90% of the book left, so I'll probably finish it in April, but really love this series. So excited for the finale, and I can't wait to continue on with the Realm of the Elderlings. So the last books that I really want to talk about probably are going to come as a surprise to you, and that's The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King by Holly Black. I absolutely love these books. Like I picked up the audiobook for The Cruel Prince because of the BookTube BFF Award. So I remember when The Cruel Prince first came out, like it was such a hyped book and everyone was talking about it, and then like the hype died down a little bit and some like bad reviews started coming out of this book. When the bad reviews started coming out for this book, I was just like, oh my gosh, thank God I didn't read it. Like I don't want to ever read this book. Like it sounds horrible. I'm never gonna read it. Mind you, I didn't actually listen to what the bad reviews said. I didn't know anything about this series. I didn't even know it was about fairies, but I was just like, never gonna read The Cruel Prince. Like it's not my kind of book, not gonna read it, never gonna happen. Then it was nominated for the BookTube BFF Award, so I was like, fine, I'll listen to the audiobook of it and maybe I'll like it. Like maybe it'll happen. I listened to about 1 hour of the audiobook for The Cruel Prince, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to have this book. I have to have this book. So I drove to Books A Million. It's only like 5 minutes away, so it's not that far. Drove to Books A Million, went in. There was only 2 copies of The Cruel Prince in the entire store. There was no copies of The Wicked King, so I couldn't get The Wicked King, but I got The Cruel Prince. I went home and I read the entire book, and I absolutely loved it. It was like 3 a.m. when I finished reading The Cruel Prince, and I went online to Amazon and like jumped for joy when I found out that The Wicked King was available for same-day shipping. I got the free same-day shipping for The Wicked King. I read that book and I waited all day long for The Wicked King, and then it came and I read The Wicked King, and I absolutely loved it also. Like, I read it, both of them, in one sitting each, back to back in 2 days. Yes, this is like one of my new favorite series of all time. Absolutely loved it. I am total trash for this series. I cannot wait for the next book in the series to come out. It doesn't come out till January of 2020. I'm like so ready for it, like right now. First of all, you have to understand, one of my favorite tropes in high fantasy is the I can't tell lies trope, because I love trying to figure out what people are saying when they're telling you the truth, but what the truth that they're saying is not what they actually are trying to mean. Like, I absolutely love that about the book. When the fairies talk, they're not allowed to tell lies, right? So when they say things, they'll say things that are the truth, but it's not necessarily how they feel. Like, they're trying to manipulate you into doing something, but you know at the same time they're telling the truth, but not really. Like, they're trying to deceive you in some way, and I love that. And like, I didn't even know this until I found these books, but I have been looking for that trope like since I first encountered it back, like, I think the Inheritance Cycle, Aragon, like, was the first time I encountered this trope. And ever since then, I have been looking for a series that does that trope really well. And this series does it so well. It's like so deliciously deceitful, and I absolutely love everything about it. The main character, Jude, I love her so much. She's such a good character. She's like such a badass, but at the same time, like, she's definitely like a teenage girl. Like, there are times I want to shake her for the stupid things that she does, but like sometimes, like, she's right. Like, it sounded like a bad idea at the time, but it turns out you were totally right. I was wrong. Like, I cede that to you. But at other times, like, she's completely wrong, and I'm just like, stop it, Jude, stop it. Like, she was a real person. She's also like the definition of what doesn't kill you make you stronger. Like, she pushes herself. She is such drive and such ambition, and I absolutely love that about her. There's also a really great will they, won't they romance in this series, and like, it's one of those like where some people will not like this romance. They won't like it at all, and it's fine. If you don't like the romance, that's fine. I loved the romance in this series. I absolutely loved it, and I love a good will they, won't they, but what's really great about a will they, won't they, it's not when you're not only sure whether they will or won't end up together, but whether they will or won't actually admit their feelings for each other, or whether they'll even act on those feelings, and that's how this series is, and I absolutely love that about it. Also, the plot of this series is heartbreaking, and it gets you. I love the plot of the series, partially because I love all the characters. The voice in this book is so good too. The writing is fantastic. Also, I read these like 2 days ago, so I'm still like on the reading high from these, but I kind of want to reread them already because like I'm so ready for the third book in this trilogy. So ready for it. Favorite books that I read this month? I mean, like, in the long term, is there a good chance that Caliban's War or Mad Ship or like one of my other 5-star books I'll end up liking more than these? Yeah, sure. In the long term, it's definitely possible. In the short term, in this very moment, these are my favorite books that I read this month, and I absolutely enjoyed them. Before we go, if you're one of those people that nominated The Cruel Prince for the BookTube Best of Ever Awards, thank you so much, because I would have never given this book the time of day if it hadn't been for that nomination. So thank you so much. I absolutely love these books and highly recommend them to anyone who likes YA fantasy. Also, just so you know, like, the plot of this book, I did guess pretty much every plot point before they happened. But that's also because I'm one of those people that try to guess what happens next. Like, it's not super obvious, but if you're actually like thinking about what happens next and you're trying to guess, you could probably have a good hunch as to what's gonna happen. Also, I kind of spoiled myself for the end of The Wicked King because I read the summary for Queen of Nothing, which is the third book in this series, and the summary for Queen of Nothing on Goodreads gives you a spoiler for the ending of The Wicked King, which is annoying as crap because I was so annoyed by myself. I do think it was something that I probably would have guessed going into The Wicked King, just because there are enough like clues and hints throughout the novel, but at the same time, if you haven't read The Wicked King, don't read that summary. Like, don't do it. You're not gonna be happy about it. So those are all the books that I read in the month of March. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I post videos every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!